In this box, friend, lies the future.
All the tools architects need to create the application of their dream.
Their mission, should they choose to accept it.
We show them the code.
And the rest is destiny.
It is the purest architecture.
But also the most complex.
The lifespan of the application will be the time and cost architects wish to put in.
But when they do, they will know how to tame the three-headed monster.
How we came up with the list of requirements and features to do the sample SaaS application, I guess in some ways it could be traced back to the three-headed monsters that we talk about: scalability, configurability, and being multi-tenant efficient. So from each of these pillars, for example, we could come up with a list of architecture things that ISVs would have to think about. So when it comes to scalability, that's one of the heads that we talk about. Definitely we were looking at SaaS ISVs having to make the transition from shipping and on-premise applications that may only require scaling to about 18 users to potentially hundreds and thousands. The second one was about customization. We hear that over and over again is traditional projects, if you want customization, you send an army of consultants in and they'll do anything you want, right? It's kind of like a tailor making a tailored suit for you. But then with SaaS, is you write the application once, you do the suit once, and then people say, no, I'm very fat or I'm very thin. You just kind of have to adjust the zipper or whatever, the Velcro,
Are you
and it
allowed
has to
to
fit.
say fat?
What's that?
Are you allowed to say fat?
Fat? Well, that's okay. I didn't say who. It could be like PHAT, and that's still fat. We have this thing that we call the, so we try to describe everything as a continuum. So the continuum that means a lot to, I guess, the ISVs is this notion of, in order to balance these three things, the multi-tenancy, the scale, the being multi-tenant efficient, the scale, the customization. On the one hand, it's using an architecture that's heavily isolated. On the other hand, they could use an architecture that's heavily shared. To easily get customization is have an isolated architecture. If they just have separate servers, separate deployment, they can do it through isolation. But what isolation doesn't give them is a scale. At some point, they're going to run out of, hit against the ceiling where they can't scale because there's no sharing, there's no economy of scale. But if they go with a shared architecture, that's when they really optimize for the scale and the multi-tenancy efficiency. But what is hard to get from a shared architecture is really the customization. If you're sharing everything, like I said, you're making a suit for everybody who looks horizontally challenged or horizontally thinly challenged or whatever you call it. It's hard to do that. There's ways to do it. There's tricks that you have to, that's where our sort of architecture.
I remember discussing this a few months back now, where we believe that the purest architecture would be the completely shared architecture. But that the most pure architecture is also the most complex to put in place. So it really ends up being a complexity versus cost-benefit ratio that one has to optimize. And the architect, again, is at the center of that decision. Do I want to invest more in my architecture to have better benefit in long term in terms of efficiency and scalability, or do I want to go for a quick hit? I isolate my architecture, I can do all the aspects I want to do, but over time, if I grow, then I'm going to pay the price.
In a business world, when people are dealing with money, and if you look at the roles of financial consultants, for example, those roles are better understood in the sense that people know that high risk, high return, low risk, lower return. It's sort of, but it's a trade-off that you have to make. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You sort of have to make this trade-off.
Well, technically you could, but you know what you're getting into.
Exactly. So I guess the role of the architects is less understood by the general public in this sense that people think that architects is just techies who likes to twiddle with bits and stuff like that. But actually the role of architects is a cross between business and technology, more on technology, but having an the business savviness is sort of key to the role of an architect.
Les traigo el futuro.
So I had here the sort of the complexity or the cost of putting that in place. And here's what the value.
Yep.
What was the No, it was the time. Sorry. And one approach would be cost of architecture. And one could be starting, with a lower cost, but over time the go and potentially even increase because the scalability and things like that might not work. And the other one would be in a higher initial cost, but with something that might decrease over time. So as you can see, you have a time here where this option becomes better. But the issue that you have to understand from an architecture perspective and talking to your stakeholders is, are you going to reach that time? If the lifespan of your application is only here, then you're better off starting with a quick and easy sort of approach. But if you're there for the long term, then you might want to optimize for the one that over time has the best sort of returns.
I guess we have sort of talked a little bit about the continuum that it's usually easier to go with an isolated architecture and get some of the heads of the three-headed monsters that you want, and it's harder to implement this. So one of the things is, I guess, the metadata aspects of the architecture. We think that in the SaaS world, metadata is really important, and that's really the fundamental shift when it comes to hands-on the implementation aspects of the architecture. That's, I think, the key difference between a traditional application architecture and a SaaS application. A SaaS application is heavily driven through metadata. Think about using metadata to keep track of the customization, both from workflow, and customers use this term that I like called polymorphic data, which is basically data models that could change according to the customers. All that customization information have to be kept as metadata and then rehydrated at runtime so that the application would behave according to the way that it's being customized for. Of course, saying this is easier than doing
It's
it.
basically coming from the business justification, what they're trying to achieve in terms of addressing the long tail, in terms of trying before you buy, in terms of all those aspects that basically are the requirements that need to be architected in. Because it's not like scale and customization multi-tenancy just because it's cool and fun to do it. It's because there are specific reasons why you want to be multi-tenant, why you want to be able to scale, and why you want to customize your application to the needs of all your customers.
We've always wanted to deliver something of an app that people could take away and have a hands-on reference in terms of how to actually implement some of the architecture best practices.
Well, if we step back, actually, it was a request from our partners to help them in making the transition. So there was this demand out from the field, so to speak, that Microsoft has been helping them tremendously in their traditional business, in the on-premise shrink-wrapped application. And they're seeing this trend, they're seeing this change happening in the market with this software as a service delivery model. And they weren't sure what to do with this. So one of the things that initiated the project was, hey, Microsoft, you helped us in the past, help us again with some guidance in how to do software as a service.
What are you guys doing?
Practicing?
What?
To prepare for the three-headed monster.